Hello and welcome to another episode of Tell Great Stories, the podcast that looks back at some of Unbound Theatre's past projects and productions. My name is Jo Pratt, and for this episode, we'll be talking all about improv. Joining me this evening are...
Hello, I am Gareth.
Hi, I'm Neil.
Hi, I'm Brian.
And I'm Dan.
Hello to you all. Yes, thanks for joining us. So starting off, Gareth, can you tell us a little bit about the improv shows Unbound has done so far, and how have things changed over time?
Yeah, so Unbound's really been doing improv for a number of years now, and it's been really interesting to sort of see Unbound's improv offering sort of grow and evolve over time. So I think when we first started doing improv, it was very, very, fast, short games with lots of sort of, jokey, high energy content to it, which was really, really fun to do and, really enjoyed by a lot of the audiences. But I think we always knew we wanted to get more story-based thing in there. We wanted to get, experiment with long form as well. So over the sort of years of doing improv, we've not only done the sort of short games, we've also tried to introduce a few more long form sort of full 15 20 minutes improvised stories into the format. And I think it was probably a couple of years ago we had our first show that had that long form element. So we had a format that was introduced to us by Neil, called Dr. Sinistra's Sinister Tales, or Dr. Sinistra, I think was something of the naming.
The Sinister Tales of Dr. Sinistra.
The Sinister Tales of Dr. Sinistra. So that was our first sort of that was our first sort of performed long form format, where it sort of evolved into this sort of 20-minute story with characters coming in, being developed, spanning across multiple scenes. So it was really interesting to be able to explore that form of improv, as well as a very interesting form of improv called the Kurosawa, which we had at one of our long form shows as well, which really tries to take a new take on improv, which is normally this very joke heavy, obvious gags coming through, and the Kurosawa says, no, we're not going to do that at all. We're going to really slow it down and really explore the emotions of what's going on in these improvised scenes. And you still get some good humors, but it's that much more slow burn humor that comes out of the characters and their emotions and the situations. So we've really gone from just the one form of improv to many, many types, and exploring new areas. So yeah, lots of evolution, lots of changes, going from strength to strength. And when we get back into live improv, you'll see even more of those developing, expanded formats coming through.
Yeah, it's quite interesting to try out those different things, because it's not necessarily what people think of when they hear the word improv. So it's, I've seen some of the longer shows and they're just really surprisingly moving. And you don't necessarily expect that, but it was a good surprise. I enjoyed it. And when people think, when you think about improv, a lot of people, if you talk about doing improv, a lot of people think that it's very scary and very nerve-wracking, is what most people assume. So I was wondering asking all of you what your first experience of improv was like, and what you enjoy about it as a form of theatre.
My first experience was just messing around with friends in the pub, sort of riffing off the conversation and probably being very irritating indeed. And I thought that was kind of what improv was. But when I first started training in improv, I found it very different, because people that don't do improv, their experience is television. It's Whose Line Is It Anyway? It's Fast and Loose, which are real gag fests. But in real improv, the humour tends to come from the endearing quirks of the characters, not the one-liners. And one of the hardest, almost the most soul-destroying things I had to learn when I started doing improv was that in scene-based improv, you have to discard a great gag because it'll destroy the scene. If you tell a great gag in the middle of a scene, you've broken the reality of the scene, and also you end up with a scene that will never die, because until someone's found a better gag than the one that was told in the middle of the scene, no one feels it's finished. So you've got to throw away the great gag and be very true to the characters in that scene.
That's been the secret of my success, Neil.
Yeah. I think that comes into something that we've really started to grow into with Unbound Improv, and I think it's a testament to sort of how far we've come, that it is a confidence thing to know that you can get the slightly more nuanced, the slightly more character-driven gags, to know that if you really do play to the scene, it's going to be brilliant. When you've got that confidence, you then have the ability to say, oh, do you know what, I don't need a quick gag here, because I know I'm going to nail it with the characters. And that's, for me, is a really special moment when you're able to sort of sit there and go, I just know this scene is going to go well. I don't need to worry myself with thinking of gags, with thinking how to be funny, because I'm playing opposite people who are just going to make this amazing anyway. So if I just play with the scene, play with the games of the scene, play with the characters and the emotions and the mechanics of whatever format we're currently doing, I know that it's going to come through and don't need to burden myself with how do I be funny, because it just happens naturally.
Yeah. So, I mean, would you say then that the gag fest comes into play in the shorter form, or not really?
Well, for me, the gags, there are certain games that do lend themselves to gags. I mean, something like Questions Only is very gag heavy, and something like Good Advice, Bad Advice, Ugly Advice are sort of games that are very gag heavy. But even in those shorter games, one of my favorite games that we play is one called The Incredible Shrinking Scene, where you sort of do a scene and it gets shorter and shorter and shorter and gets more and more bizarre elements added to it as the scenes sort of go on and shorten. And my favorite ones of those are the ones where people just create a really solid base scene to start with, and then just lean into the speeding up and the peculiarities that get entered to it. And you always find that the more solid that base scene is, the more, again, you just kind of think, yes, I can do that. I can have fun with this getting shorter and more interesting. And you stop thinking about what gags can I use and just start thinking about how can I have fun with this.
I've not got anything like Neil or Gareth's experience, so I still see myself as learning improvisation, but this is something I'm just beginning to understand. I remember about a year ago, we had somebody new come to the improvisation workshops, and bless him, you could see the tension because he was trying to think of the perfect bon mot. And you know, I took him to one side and just said, I know exactly what you're going through, because that's what I was doing when I started doing improvisation. But really, seriously, do just relax. You know, you don't worry about it. He never came back.
Dan, do you have anything to add?
No, I think I totally agree with the gag. It's very hard not to do the gag you want to do, or like I'm terrible as well for like breaking character and stuff and going, but when you see it done, when we went, there's like these festival things for improv, and when you see it done and everyone is so committed to that scene, it's just, and there were so many jokes I even thought while watching it, they could put that in, but that's just ruining then what happens and what they build up and what they develop in that whole scene. And it's just so important to try and turn that bit of your brain off, to not just go, this is a funny joke, I'm going to put this in now.
And yeah, it's so tempting, and you're right, you do turn it off. It's difficult. So Neil, you do have a lot of experience at improvising. So what would be the three things that anyone trying it for the first time, what would be your advice?
I think the first thing is that we build on what's there. We walk onto the stage with absolutely nothing. If you have any preconceived ideas, you're bound to ruin the scene. So you go on with nothing, and you get a tiny offer from your scene partner, and you add something little, and 2 or 3 lines later, and you've established the entire platform for the scene. You know who you are, what the relationship is, where you are. And once you've got those out the way, you can start getting into the interesting bits of the scene. If you've got a scene that's set in a bakery, nobody wants to hear about the bread. You may do some object work of rolling bread, making buns and so on, but the audience doesn't want to hear you name check 10 different types of bread. The bread is not what it's about. What the scene is about is the people. It is, who are these two people? What's their relationship? And crucially, what's just about to change? Have I and my scene partner, have we always sort of hated each other but never expressed it? Or hated each other because it's a veil, because we actually have a real crush on each other that we're trying to fight off? Or is somebody going to change fundamentally their life view? That's what's fascinating about the improv. It's the relationships. The second thing in improv is, if something is bad, make it worse, make it count more. If someone is riding a horse across a field and they fall off, well, so what? If the reason that they are riding across the field is because they're just about to propose to somebody who's just about to go on a long trip, suddenly the stakes are much higher. Suddenly it matters hugely if they make that journey successfully. It's not just some random person we don't care about falling off the horse. Now we really want that to succeed, and when it doesn't, it matters. And the third thing I'd say is embrace failure. When we train in improv, we set each other impossible tasks and see how we get on. And there's nothing more fun than failing with enormous commitment. We shouldn't fear failure. We should embrace it and have fun with it and come out stronger the other side.
Well, I think that leads into something that's really interesting that I find as a watcher of improv is you have to almost earn the right to fail. Like when you go in and you show real skill, you show real ability, you create great stuff, and then suddenly you're going to find a point where you just utterly fall on your ass. But if that's intermixed with all of this great stuff happening, it makes the failure more fun, because it's that moment when you go, oh no, wait, they are human. And even the best improvisers in the world will have moments where they utterly fail. But you know that, they could have done it. It just, in this instance, they happen to get the one bit that they can't do, or they happen to blank out. And that makes it all the more funny. And I think that's something that, again, that we've really got to that point where, as a troupe, we've earned the right to fail now. And it comes through really funny and interesting, because you go, they're actually really good. And it's really amusing that they couldn't do that specific thing.
I was thinking about this podcast, and this reminds me, what you're saying, Gareth, reminds me of like the circus. The last time I took my kids to the circus, there was this big act that they were going to do something terribly dangerous. And they, absolute silence, please. And they tried it and they failed, and they tried it and they failed. And initially you're thinking, oh my goodness, this is going wrong. But then actually you start to realize this is part of the act. This is part of the tension. It's part of the drama of the thing. So yeah, I get it, actually. I mean, again, it's something that I've had to learn over the last few years. It would have been dreadful if something had like gone wrong, inverted in commas, on stage. But actually, I think in terms of the tension and the drama of everything that's going on, the audience actually want that tension. Otherwise, it's not improvisation, is it?
Mm. And like I say,
it feels a bit like a...
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, even the best improvisers will have moments when they fail, when they're sort of asked to do an accent and they just can't do it, or when they're sort of asked to do a soliloquy and they just go, I've forgotten what a soliloquy is. But you sort of, that is part of it, and as long as it's not sort of every other line is a failure, those failures are what make it shown as improv, and everyone will do that, and they also make your successes all the more, all the greater, because if you do get a moment where you've sort of failed to do an accent or something, and then later on in the show you're asked to do a different accent and you absolutely nail it, or you don't even nail it but you just go for it and it's wrong but it was brilliant anyway, you get the most uproarious applause from that moment, because they link back to sort of the previous moments as well.
One of my most epic failures was on the Edinburgh Fringe, and we were doing the three-headed expert. And unusually, I was in the expert. I was the middle seat there. And partway through the scene, I corpsed. And the more you try not to laugh, the more you laugh. And the people next to me noticed because my shoulders were jiggling, and they started laughing and desperately trying not to laugh. And then the moment that the three of us let go, and the entire audience went with us, and we were just rolling around 2-3 minutes. We were completely useless. We couldn't do any scene work, tears rolling down our faces.
Yeah, that's a lovely moment, isn't it? Can you just briefly explain what the three-headed expert is?
Yes, the three-headed expert, you have three people sitting next to each other, and they act as one person, and they speak one word at a time. And you have an interviewer who will ask them a question, and if they are doing too well, he will ask them a really difficult question. Or if they're struggling, the interviewer may help clarify what the answer was, just so that the thing flows nicely from the audience's point of view. And the three-headed expert, if one of the people crosses their legs, the other people do the same. Or if somebody puts their hand up to their face, they all do it. So you've got this great visual thing of it being one person. But it's a hard game, and generally at the end you make them read a poem from their latest book or sing a song or something that is utterly impossible at the best of times and even harder when there are three of them.
So plenty of room for failure there.
Yeah.
So that would be an example, I guess, of a short form game, and short form games are at the heart of a lot of improv shows. Asking all of you, do you have a favourite game to play, and can you explain quickly what it is and how it works? Dan, should we go to you first?
No, I haven't thought of one.
Oh, okay.
Brian. Well, actually, I think, I'm not 100% sure what it's called, but it's basically the one where you get the audience to write down lines in the interval, and you basically pull a handful out just before you go on stage, and then you do a scene and just pull out a line at random, and you have to incorporate it into the sketch. What's it called, Neil? Because the last time I did it,
it's called audience lines.
Audience lines, because the last one I did was with Neil, and I just enjoy it because, first of all, the audience love it because they get that frisson. It's that like, oh, that's my line, that was my thing, and of course they're the ones who are coming up with lines that they're hoping are going to nail you. And in a way you can't lose, because if they have come up with an incredibly complicated or inappropriate line, it's funny. And if you can do something with it, it's funny. So it can be challenging, but I've always found that very, very rewarding.
Yes, that's one of the utterly impossible games, because you've got no idea what's coming.
Yeah.
But whereas when we are doing scenes, we have the rule of no blocking. Everything you do is building the direction of the scene. This will cut straight across you. You'll get a line that is completely random, has got no sense of place in the scene, and your job as an improviser is to deliver it with conviction. This isn't something that a random person has said and that you can sort of dismiss. This is something that you are delivering as a proper line in the scene, and you must immediately justify. And so you've got to be incredibly fleet of foot, and the audience absolutely love watching you struggle.
Yeah, it is really good for flexing improvisation muscle.
I think the audience try and come up with the most difficult to use line that they possibly can, don't they?
Yeah.
To make it funny.
Yeah, and from my point of view, I'm a huge fan of that game particularly when it has a transformative effect on a scene. So a scene can be about something like, say, you're two janitors and you're mopping up a spillage, and then suddenly you end up reading an audience line that sort of says, always pluck a parrot whenever it's near your shoulder, or something like that. It could be anything at all. But the best moments in that game are when suddenly an audience line comes through, and it completely transforms what the scene is about and what your sort of characters are doing and how they interact with their surroundings. And then if each line does that, you get some really interesting stories. But it's a great prompt for creativity to come through.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Is there anybody else got any other games?
I was only joking.
Oh, Dan, you have done your homework. Well done.
Well, no, I love like loads and loads of games, but Gareth mentioned it earlier. I love doing the Kurosawa. It's like, because it's serious, you can really like almost like turn the knife in the audience, you know, and like you can go quite dark, and there's like awkward moments that would be created awkward in life, and you can really pull on them and grow them and stuff. I remember when we did one, well, it'd be a couple of years ago now, and my dad was in the audience and he watched it, and afterwards he said, oh, it was good, but it's a shame that I'd have thought you'd be the younger brother and he'd have been the older brother. And I was like, all right. And then he said it again later, and I was like, you know, there wasn't a scene that we were given at the start. And he was like, oh, I was like, that was completely all made up. And you could hear him kind of go, oh, bloody hell. Do you know what I mean? It was like that. And there was a great thing where, so like he was my brother, and there was a bit that I left a little drop and Katie picked up on, as that basically she might have been pregnant and it was my child. And Katie picked up on it quite quickly. And then when we did it again, brought it back a bit later, you actually heard like some of the audience members gasp, because they were so committed to us being in that scene as much as we were. It was really, you know, revelation and shock. It's brilliant. The serious stuff can be really hard hitting and just really fun to do.
I watched that and I agree. I think I was one of the people gasping. It was very powerful stuff. Can you just really briefly explain what Kurosawa means?
I will defer to Neil for this one.
Well done.
The Kurosawa format is taken from the Japanese director Kurosawa, who made a film called Rashomon, which told the same story through 3 different viewpoints. And what we do in the improv version of Kurosawa is we will play a scene once, and one of the 3 characters can at any time step out and tell the audience not what they've seen or what's going to happen, but a little bit about what's going on in the character's brain in terms of character development or history or outlook. And that obviously, although it's spoken to the audience, is fed into the other 2 actors. And so we will run that scene for about 4 or 5 minutes. And then we'll come back and we'll run it again. And this time it'll be broadly the same scene, but we'll hear the thoughts of the second character, and the third time of the third character. And the scene will evolve significantly by what we learn of each character's backstory when we see it. And we will learn some dark and uncomfortable truths sometimes.
Gareth, question for you. One of Unbound's improv projects is a panel game. Can you tell us a bit about it? It's called Everything Wrong with Politics. Tell us how it started and a bit about how it works.
I mean, I'm honestly not entirely sure how the Everything Wrong with Politics sort of format came about, because we were sort of, deciding where do we want to go with improv? What are the kind of things that we want to do? And we knew we definitely wanted to do some form of panel game and sort of, right, let's, throw some ideas around. Let's figure something out. And then it just sort of came this idea of, let's do something themed around politics, but getting the ideas for, a political party from the audience. And sort of, I knew that would be somewhat of the framework. And then it was really just a case of thinking of all the things that can be, bad or manipulative or strange about politics, and trying to base around each of those things. So the way that it works is that you get a suggestion for a political party name from the audience, and that then becomes the name of a party led by one of the leaders. And then we go into each of the rounds based around that. So it starts with a party manifesto being given by each of the leaders, and in key with actual politics, the party manifestos are, wildly exaggerated and, quite out there, and you don't actually have to put forward policies that are going to make sense or are going to be easy to implement that you might be held to. So you sort of say you'd got the suggestion of you are the say you'd got the suggestion of you are the fast food party. You would then be sort of saying, yeah, we are the fast food party and we're going to get your policies to you within 5 minutes of your order, or it's absolutely free. And yeah, you get a free packet of fries with every policy that you sort of come up with, and things like that, and go through and base it. And then the other rounds are all based off other peculiarities with politics. So you notice that obviously one of the, not actually modern, it's probably a bit dated now, but one of the things to do with politics is the obsession with spin doctors. So there's a spin round where the audience will suggest scandals that you've got involved with, and you will then sort of buzz in to say how you can justify this scandal and how you can deflect the badness of the scandal. And then we've got around like passing the buck, where the idea is something's gone wrong with the country and you need to explain how it's definitely someone else's fault and nothing to do with you. So it's all sort of finding a vice with politics, and then what rounds can we base that around?
Yes, it's almost as if it's based on politics.
Almost as if it's based on, say politics and everything that's wrong with it. Who would have known?
Weird. Brian, you have been a team captain on Everything Wrong with Politics. Can you speak to some of your most memorable moments from the game? Anything that springs to mind?
Well, it was a great honour to be asked to be a captain, because I hadn't been improvising for that long, and the opportunity to improvise sitting down was a golden opportunity I couldn't pass up. I enjoy it. I mean, it's been great fun. My favourite round is actually the first round, which is where you're trying to introduce your team in the style of the party that's been chosen for you. I suppose possibly thinking about it in the context of this conversation, maybe it's because the idea is just formed fresh in your mind, whereas like half an hour later, it's oh yeah, we're still the this and that party. So I enjoy doing the introductions, and I have the honour of having Dan and Katie in my team usually, and a more disreputable group of characters to form a political party I can't think of. So it's a blessing, you know.
Well, your fast food party always tells such whoppers.
No, you've just got a chip in your shoulder.
Hey, I thought we weren't supposed to go for the funny gags. We're supposed to avoid them.
I know. I think that's what he's done.
This format is very gag heavy. It's as many puns as you can squeeze in.
Yeah. Which actually is quite fun, you know. Yeah,
you can get them out your system, Brian.
Thank you. Yeah,
in that particular game.
Much to my children's chagrin. Yeah.
Does anybody else have a favourite round of Everything Wrong with Politics?
I love the true and false news stories. We've found that the more improbable the story, the more likely it is to be true. And when people research the stories they're going to throw in, it turns out that there are the most bizarre coincidences out there that are well beyond the capacity of my imagination to better them.
Yeah, stranger than fiction, as they say. Dan, in recent years, Unbound have performed long-form improv, as we've talked about, as well as shorter games. And as an actor, how does the experience differ between the two? Do you have a preference between them, and what's the most challenging thing about long form, and what's the most rewarding? So quite a few questions there.
Well, you don't have to learn any lines for improv. That's always a real boost.
It's a bonus.
Yeah, always like that one. I think it's kind of funny when you're when I before I'm going on stage to do something that's scripted, I'm trying to remember that first line. Always think of what that first line is, and then I'm fine as I go away. I'm always trying to remember that first line, get that in your head. First line. But when you do improv, it is the exact opposite. I'm trying to think of absolutely nothing. They may have thrown offers out and we're about to come on, but I don't want that stuff in my head yet, because I find if you already go on with a bit of a premise of who we are or what we're doing or something. I've got an idea of, it's maybe we're two plumbers. I'm thinking, okay, we could be on a job and we're doing this or something. You go on with this premise. But the problem is the person who's coming on with you, they haven't thought of that. So if you're going on thinking what you're doing and they throw something completely off, it throws you. So you need to keep your mind as completely blank as possible when doing improv, as opposed to the complete opposite when you're doing scripted work. So I always find that really interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. And it's quite difficult as well, actually, to abandon things and clear your mind. It's not easy.
I found that as well early on doing improv as well. Yeah, when I want it to go this way, and when it doesn't kind of go that way, sometimes you try and shoehorn it in, and it just would not work. And it's like, let it go. It's going a different way. Go with that, and pick up on and that's the thing about, I suppose, about, like you say about challenging with long form. But the main thing about it all, isn't it? It's the offers. You're trying to throw out as many offers as possible and hoping that someone's picking them up, and vice versa, that you're hoping to pick them up from someone else as well. Because that can be kind of frustrating as well when you feel like you're throwing them out so obvious. It's like, come on, we're going to go this way. And the other person's like, nope, don't know what he's doing, but it's not going like that. But and then also, again, with the long form, you need to set up very quickly. You have the, where are you? Who are you? What's the relationship? What are your names? How do we care about these characters? What are they doing? And it's interesting how you manage to get those points across very naturally and very quickly. You can do it as well.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about, really, isn't it?
I mean, going back to that first few seconds in, whether it be short form or long form, that first few seconds in a scene where both actors now finally say, right, we're starting. It is always a balance between sort of thinking, well, if no one suggests anything, then nothing's going to happen. But if you come in absolutely glued to this has got to happen, you're not going to be responding to what the other person is bringing forward. And particularly when I do work with you guys on this call, but anyone in Unbound really, I love it when you get that moment of thinking, I know that whatever I suggest is going to be taken up upon, but I also know if I just wait for them to come up with something, they will end up throwing something out. And it's a real balance to be able to kind of say, I'm going to bring ideas, but I'm not going to be wedded to them. And I know whenever I start a scene with you, Dan, I always know that we're immediately going to settle into something and we're going to build off each other. And I always feel like we hit the ground with a character, and whatever we push forward to happen gets picked up by the other person and built upon. And I think it really shows that, you have developed that ability to come into it blank, but also fizzing with ideas. Rather than it being one idea that you're sort of stuck with, you're sort of fizzing with many. So when it comes to either needing something or to pick up on something from someone else, it really shines through in those first few moments of a scene.
There is that brilliant point as well. When it works and you're there together and you both know you're on the same wavelength and you're both going in the same direction, but with so many different possibilities, it's an awesome feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you're in the zone. And it's about as much about, it sounds like what you're saying, it's as much about what you don't do as what you do, and knowing when to do and when to kind of give and let somebody else do, and when to run with it and when to just let it lie.
Yeah, that thing of being on the same wavelength is absolutely it.
I mean, we had, I think, if I could, I think Dan, Katie and I, we had a moment like that I was really, really proud of. At the last Everything Wrong with Politics, we were playing the evil baddie party or something like that. And somebody kind of came out with a sort of an Austin Powers evil laugh. And we all, within a microsecond, you couldn't tell who started it. We all started at the same time and we all finished it. Was it you?
It was me, yeah, of course it was.
Of course. But it's a team effort. But yes, Dan gets the credit. But we all started and we all finished at the same time. And I don't know how that worked, but it really was. I came away thinking that was brilliant, because normally, when you start improvisation, like Dan says, you want to be the one who has the funny line. But to have a really good moment of teamwork where you're just sort of sensing what the other person's doing, that was a really special moment for me.
Gareth, can you tell us a bit about what's next for improv with Unbound Theatre?
Yeah, so we've got a lot of plans to develop particularly the long form and the storytelling elements of what Unbound is going to be doing. So we do have with Unbound a storytelling initiative, and there will be some improvised storytelling coming in relation to that, specific to that project. But we're also really going to look to develop our our long form narrative formats, similar to the Dr. Sinistra format that we've been doing. We're looking to really develop that so we can then have, say, a long form fairy tale format as well as the Sinistra horror format, and then maybe a sort of period drama style format. With the idea being that we've got lots of different genres of long form that we can then do. So the idea that we can then switch between them and have many different types coming through and look to lengthen them as well. So we've had a 20-minute 4-scene long form coming through. We sort of looking to develop that so you can go up to sort of half an hour 6-scene and really sort of bring that forward, but at the same time making sure that we do keep the short form and the more fun, fast-paced stuff happening as well. So yeah, I mean, a lot happening, a lot developing, and watch this space with regards to that, really.
Sounds good. So I mean, that kind of more or less brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you all very much for joining, and for your thoughts and your memories, and thank you to everybody who's listening. If you'd like to listen to any more episodes of Tell Great Stories and lots of other great audio and video content, there's plenty on unboundtheatre.co.uk. if you head over there, or look up Unbound Theatre on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or SoundCloud, and join us again soon. Thank you.